our next home. Of all the planets and moons in our solar system, the red planet is likely the best candidate for human colonization. If you're 50 or younger in 2020, chances are high that you'll live to see a manned mission to Mars. But will that mission be successful, or will it result in disaster? Will we face death by misadventure, or death by some unknown horror? Of all the planets in our solar system, none have a reputation like Mars. It is the warrior planet, the planet of rage, the planet of death, the planet of blood. Point in fact, the music you heard in the intro was Mars by Gustav Holst. Holst wrote a symphony of the planets, and each planet got a theme. Jupiter's theme was called the Bringer of Jollity. Saturn's theme was the Bringer of Old Age. Venus was the Bringer of Peace. And Mars was the Bringer of War. The Mars Suite is by far the most famous of the musical pieces. The planets in our solar system are named after gods of Roman mythology, and Mars is named after the god of war. It seemed predestined that humanity would set our eyes on Mars first. We do love ourselves some warfare and death, don't we? But what exactly have we imagined when it comes to Mars? Well, we've certainly imagined invaders from Mars, famously seen in the H.G. Wells novel War of the Worlds, and by default, in its later cinematic adaptations. War of the Worlds envisions a dying civilization on Mars, one that jealously watches the rich and bountiful life on Earth, craving it for itself. The Martians come to Earth, and we are completely unprepared for their technological superiority. They make mincemeat of us, or, as in the Spielberg version of the story, we're turned into red dust. The Wells novel was a smash success upon its release in 1897. It is as well remembered today as other influential Wells stories, like The Island of Dr. Moreau, Things to Come, and The Invisible Man. And just like those stories, War of the Worlds shaped the science fiction genre, and somewhat indirectly, the horror genre as well. In fact, due to the cultural impact of the Wells book, Martians became the archetypical space invader. Though to be fair, we've also invaded Mars plenty of times, at least in our stories. John Carter of Mars was a series of science fiction adventure novels written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The first one was called Under the Moons of Mars, later retitled A Princess of Mars. The John Carter series was immensely popular, almost as popular as Burroughs' other gargantuan success, Tarzan. In the novels, John Carter is a Civil War soldier. He imagines himself visiting Mars and magically ends up transported to the planet. There, he finds himself embroiled in a planet-wide conflict, and Carter becomes the hero of Mars. It is a fairy tale with monsters, princesses, good guys, bad guys, and high adventure. As influential as the War of the Worlds was in how we portray invaders coming to Earth, John Carter on Mars was equally influential in how we initially saw journeys to Mars taking place. But while the H.G. Wells image of space invaders has endured, the image of life on Mars, as seen in Burroughs' books, has changed over the decades. Why? One word: science.
I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
Back in 1912, when the John Carter series was first written, little was known about life on the Red Planet. Early astronomers had observed dark and bright patches on Mars, theorizing that these were oceans and land masses. At that time, we didn't yet know that the surface of Mars was arid and lifeless. We didn't know that there were no jungles, no vast seas, no civilizations, no Earth-like conditions.
I don't know how we can breathe, but we can breathe.
Back then, we really only had our imaginations, as well as a series of widely publicized and discussed observations by scientists. One such observation was that there were canals on Mars, or rather, canali. Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli observed what he called canali on Mars in 1877. This was translated to canals in English, but the Italian word can also be translated to channel, duct, or gully. Schiaparelli wasn't necessarily saying that these were canals built by intelligent beings, but that didn't matter. The public went wild with speculation, and American astronomer Percival Lowell theorized in 1894 that these canals might be irrigation networks created by a Martian civilization. The fact that War of the Worlds followed in 1897 and the John Carter series in 1912 is no coincidence. However, later scientific observations called the existence of canali into question, positing that the observations were a byproduct of viewing Mars with 19th century era telescopes.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
When Mariner 4 arrived for a Martian flyby in 1965, the photographs it took put an end to the discussion about irrigation canals on Mars. Mars was flat, dry, and dead. There was no sign of intelligent life, nor of any displaced Civil War-era soldiers dashing about heroically. But the John Carter image had endured and influenced science fiction culture for several decades, leaving behind a vast legacy of both cinema and literature. These pre-1965 science fiction tales tend to feature a John Carter-influenced approach to the planet. Several silent films showed civilizations on Mars, including the one we see here in the Soviet-era silent film Aelita, Queen of Mars. There is, of course, a worker revolution on the planet, though the adventure is explained away as a dream in the end. In the totally weird science fiction musical Just Imagine, the heroes actually do take a trip to Mars. Here the planet appears lush like a botanical garden. Fun, dancing, romance, and intrigue ensues. In The Angry Red Planet, a minor science fiction film best remembered for its bat-rat crab monster, the planet again appears almost tropical with weird plant-like structures. Abbott and Costello also got in on the action in Abbott and Costello Go to Mars, but strangely, they take a wrong turn and end up on Venus instead, where, of course, they meet hot space women. And in the last hurrah for the John Carter-style version of Mars, the sci-fi adventure Robinson Crusoe on Mars portrays the red planet as barren, yet with exoticized humanoid life present and ready for human guidance. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, by the way, is a fun double feature with The Martian. Two similar stories, one with a John Carter-esque approach and the other with a down-to-earth scientific one, courtesy of the imagination of author Andy Weir. Yet after the Mariner 4 mission in 1965, Mars became what we know it is today, a barren world, one far more conducive to horror, one would think. With our expanded scientific knowledge about Mars, we learned that the planet was as violent and brutal as its namesake Roman god. There wasn't room for civilizations on the harsh planetary surface. Instead, it is something of a hellscape, a troubled, brutal, barren land that will kill you as quick as any horror movie villain. Yet most of the content set on Mars tends to remain purely in the science fiction realm. Understandable, really. Mars is great for survival stories, such as The Martian. It is also great for post-Carteresque fantasies like Total Recall, and hell, the 2012 adaptation of Burroughs' novel, John Carter. It's perfect for cradles of civilization-style stories, where artifacts on Mars reveal something of our interstellar origins, as seen in video games like Mass Effect and the original XCOM Enemy Unknown, or as in Brian De Palma's film, Mission to Mars. And sometimes, Mars is great simply as a representation of a way station for our journeys further out into the great, vast beyond. like in Ad Astra. But, as mentioned, the Red Planet is vastly underused for horror. I always found that strange, because we do fear Mars on some level. That much was clear already in War of the Worlds. The fear felt in that narrative was a manifestation of colonialist worry, and perhaps even guilt. Who was to say that what Europeans were doing to the rest of the world wouldn't also be done to Europeans by invaders from Mars? In War of the Worlds, the crisis is resolved when the aliens die off due to their immune systems being unable to handle Earth's bacteria. Wells was an intelligent author, one prone to allegory and analysis of his contemporary society. The Island of Dr. Moreau, for instance, was a commentary on vivisection and the treatment of animals. Thus, it is not too far of a stretch to imagine War of the Worlds as a commentary on the droves of European colonists dying from disease in Africa and Asia. Conversely, traveling to Mars, more than one cinematic astronaut has found themselves afflicted by some Martian disease or virus. This is usually where the horror genre intersects with the Red Planet. Let's take a look at some of these films. In The Last Days on Mars, a team of astronauts find themselves infected by a Martian pathogen. The bacteria changes the astronauts into zombie-like threats, and soon the survivors must face off against their former friends. The Martian base functions much as a haunted house does in other horror movies, though here with an excellent excuse for not just leaving when the threat appears. Getting off the planetary surface just isn't that easy. Similarly, in Species 2, the first astronaut to set foot on Mars brings back an infection. On Earth, the disease runs rampant. Lots of horror, and some alien sex, results. This was far from the first time an unlucky astronaut brought something unhealthy back from Mars.
Now I'll just reach behind her ear and we should...
It, The Terror from Beyond Space, is today a forgotten film, and probably with good reason. While I personally love this movie, it is admittedly a clunky little story, but it's indirectly one of the most influential sci-fi horror films produced. The story concerns a rescue crew landing on Mars to pick up the sole survivor from a previous mission. Said survivor, Colonel Edward Carruthers, stands accused of having killed his fellow travel companions in order to hoard the scant resources on board until a rescue crew could come pick him up. Carruthers, however, insists that there was something evil on Mars doing the killing, a creature murdering his fellow astronauts one by one. None of his rescuers believe him. The rocket ship blasts off from the Martian surface, heading back home. Soon, however, the crew discovers that Carruthers was telling the truth. A vampiric monstrosity has stowed away in the air ducts, feeding off the blood of the astronauts. It, The Terror from Beyond Space, was a small film, but its ideas spread far and wide. The grim and dark mood was copied by other sci-fi horror tales, seen in films like Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, and significantly, in Ridley Scott's Alien. Alien writers Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett were genre fans, and they knew that a good premise could be retooled and reinvented. The plot point of a spaceship accidentally picking up an alien presence has been with us ever since, seen in countless later variations. Significantly, the first true iteration of this plot was a Martian, and thus, Mars indirectly gave us Alien, one of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever produced. Horror maestro John Carpenter also got in on the Martian horror action. In Ghosts of Mars, Carpenter has the heroes face off against zombie-like enemies possessed by Martian ghosts. It's never really made clear exactly what these enemies are, just that they are bad and that they hold Ice Cube, Natasha Henstridge, and Jason Statham under siege at a Martian outpost. Ghosts of Mars was a virtual remake of Carpenter's own gritty thriller, Assault on Precinct 13 from 1976, down to the plot point of having police officers and criminals band together to survive an extreme outside threat. Carpenter had already done an apocalyptic variation on the theme in Prince of Darkness, so why not do it on Mars as well? Alas, Ghosts of Mars doesn't work, and you'd be much better off watching just about any other Carpenter movie. Too bad, because John Carpenter of Mars sounds goddamn perfect on paper. Video games also wanted in on the Martian action, and they weren't about to be outdone. Doom concerned a space marine having to fight hordes of demons when the gates of hell are opened on Mars. Doom was one of the pioneering games in the first-person shooter genre, and the franchise remains strong and relevant to this day. The film adaptation wasn't nearly as successful, perhaps because it was forced to add a plot to what was basically an intense, badass, and mostly plotless gaming franchise. The 2005 cinematic adaptation of Doom has a bunch of space marines teleport to a research facility on Olduvai, Mars. They're soon afflicted by a Martian pathogen that turned them into demonic monsters. Mayhem ensues. The film is interesting because it samples so many classic Martian story tropes. There's artifacts on Mars revealing a previous doomed civilization. This harkens back to the John Carter idea of Planet Mars, also with its ancient civilizations. Doom also uses the lurking monster hiding in dark places, as seen in It, the Terror from Beyond Space. Not to mention that whole disease thing from World of Worlds, though here it's the heroes and not the bad guys being undone by illness. The problem is that the cinematic Doom never feels unique, and Mars becomes just another dark haunted house, never really used for what it's worth. As much as I enjoy the testosterone-laden B-movie ride that Doom offers, I can't really recommend it to anyone but hardcore genre fans. Alas, Mars and horror never really seems to come together, not yet at least. So while Mars has been an indirect inspiration on the horror genre, it never really had a true horror classic of its own. The 5 films I covered, The Last Days on Mars, Species 2, It, the Terror from Beyond Space, Ghosts of Mars, and Doom, none of them are particularly beloved today. Mars is primarily remembered as a science fiction icon, and not a horror icon. In the sci-fi genre, there are invaders from Mars, Martian artifacts, Martian civilizations akin to our own, bat-rat spiders, and even Martians stealing both our moms and our Santa Claus.
Santa Claus, you're coming with us.
And I suppose that's appropriate, because the most likely way Mars will kill you in real life is by exposure or suffocation.
Now this is the plan. Get your ass to Mars.
When we finally do get our asses to Mars, we won't face space vampires, alien artifacts, or demons. But we will face a planet on which we can't naturally survive. However, like intrepid heroes in horror cinema, we can handle it. It is only a matter of time before humanity conquers Mars, and not the other way around. Once that happens, the planet might lose some of its mystical allure, but that's okay. There are always other challenges that await us out there. Titan, perhaps. Extrasolar journeys. Distant worlds. Unimagined realms. I'm sure we can find plenty to put fear in our bones and strike wonder in our hearts in those parts of the universe as well. But remember, Mars was there for us first. My name is Wolfcraft. This is History of Horror. If you liked the episode, I'd sure appreciate it if you liked, shared, and subscribed. Also, if you want to check out some of my other works, I'm an author. My science fiction novel God of Desolation is currently available on Amazon, and my upcoming mystery novel Richly Drawn will be available in 2021 on inkshares.com. Thanks aplenty.